This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell and Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com.
This episode is also brought to you by Citizens for Affordable Rates. New York's car insurance costs are nearly double the national average, and state lawmakers must take action to make driving more affordable. Learn more at citizensforaffordablerate.com.
It was hiding, I'm sorry.
Exactly.
You're hiding in the Senate side, you know?
Yes, I am hiding on the Senate side.
Grace has a reason for being there, but you know.
Get comfortable, Grace.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a podcast about power and politics in New York State government. And on this episode, we're doing a status check on the race for governor with Nick Reisman, the Albany bureau chief for Politico New York, who recently took the temperature of this possibly not-so-contested contest. So when you and I talked in February, you likened Republicans' chance of winning back the executive mansion to hitting a half-court shot in basketball. And in the month plus since then, we've seen public polling that has Hochul with a 20-point lead over Blakeman, and even the Republicans' internal polling that you've reported on has him down 9 points for whatever those numbers might be worth. And then there's the fundraising side of things, which you've also reported about extensively, which in addition to the challenge of an arms race with the governor, who is a prolific fundraiser, the county executive also has this ambiguous path to matching funds. So with that backdrop, should we now say a GOP gubernatorial win is more like a three-quarters shot, or is there some other metaphor you'd prefer to pull out for this interview?
I don't know. Maybe it's a half-court shot with Shaq in his prime standing in front of you,
Okay.
With his arms up. I don't know, but it's definitely still a very difficult road that Bruce Blakeman is traveling as he tries to become governor of New York and the first Republican to win statewide in 20 years. I mean, look, fundraising is a major part of this. He's got to show some sort of viability here that he's able to raise competitively with the governor, or at least try to keep some semblance of pace. And at the moment, he is not. He has been getting largely funds from his home county Republican committee in Nassau County. And we've learned in the last couple of days the Democrats, the state public campaign finance board, are considering denying him public matching funds based on this kind of Kafka-esque concern that he didn't fill out a proper form and the form doesn't actually exist in the iteration that it needs to. That's probably going to be a legal challenge, but the clock is ticking, every day that he doesn't have that money to start going up on air and other aspects that the governor is already starting to do is going to be a real challenge for him. And then layer on top of all of this is the fact that you have what is shaping up to be a pretty tough year for Republicans at this point. Right. We don't know what October, November is really going to look like politically at this point, but we do know that usually midterm elections for the party in power are not great. And gas now is heading up toward $4 a gallon. The president's war in Iran is not especially popular. And the president himself is not especially popular in New York. And you take all of these things into consideration, you put them all together, it shows you that the Nassau County executive has a really, really challenging task before him when it comes to winning statewide.
Well, let's unpack some of those points you made. So on the public financing side of things. As you pointed out, Democrats on the Public Campaign Finance Board, if they're in alignment, they can deny Blakeman the opportunity to access matching funds because of this paperwork snafu. That might get overturned in the courts, but it would still cause a headache for the campaign, which is why I imagine the Democrats will likely use their edge in this process to stick it to their Republican colleagues, knowing that there really is no public relations downside to this level of pettiness. Based on your experience in Planet Albany, does that make sense to you, or do you have more faith in our public servants to put aside their partisan feelings and to say, you know what, at the end of the day, this was a best intended effort to fulfill out the paperwork to the extent that he knew it in December. So let's give him a pass and everybody fights on equal playing fields.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I won't go into the minutia of why this is happening, but essentially he would have needed to have had his lieutenant governor running mate all lined up by December. When he was actually entering the race and signaling that he was going to try to access public matching funds. Obviously, just logistically, that was not going to be even remotely feasible to do something like that, considering the start that he got. Say Democrats in the next couple of days or so move to deny him access to these matching funds, he will probably file a legal challenge. I think that is probably a foregone conclusion. Then, typically the state court system does try to fast track these election law cases. Say he does get that money. Say it's fast tracked and this is resolved after a month. Well, that's a month that he doesn't have those public matching funds that he needed in order to get up on TV, that he needed in order to fund his campaign, in order to be competitive with Governor Hochul, who is going to have, at the moment, at least 10 times the amount of cash that Bruce Blakeman is currently playing with. So absent some very rich guy coming in and seeding a super PAC to support Bruce Blakeman and to trash Governor Hochul on TV, like we saw 4 years ago, if we don't see something like that, this is really, really going to be a massive fundraising disparity that's shaping up at this point. I mean, what happens is money flows to the person who the big donors think is going to win. Right?
People without a partisan fight in this.
Yes. And these are, you will have small dollar donations from the base of the party who legitimately believe in their candidate and they think they're the best person to win.
Bless their hearts.
The big checks from the big donors, from the whales, those always go to the candidate who they think is going to win and best serves their interest in office. Lee Zeldin came within 6 points. He got a lot of money. He got a lot of support from types like Ron Lauder because Lauder thought, look, Zeldin may actually have a shot here. From that perspective, it wasn't throwing good money necessarily after bad. From his perspective, because that was kind of considered an investment that may or may not pay off. This time around, Blakeman really needs to demonstrate some sort of viability. It's why his campaign put out that poll that showed it was an internal survey conducted by John McLaughlin, who's a Republican pollster, pretty well known in GOP circles. He's done polling, I believe, for the Trump campaigns. And that poll showed Blakeman down by only 9 points. 3.5% margin of error. Remains to be seen whether he oversampled the suburbs, where Blakeman is expected to do well, or undersampled New York City, where Governor Hochul is expected to do well. But I think the point is that the Blakeman camp really needs to demonstrate right now, in late March, that they are going to be running a competitive statewide bid against Governor Hochul. And that's a narrative that they don't want or need out there at this moment.
Costs are up everywhere, and New Yorkers need relief. Thankfully, Governor Hochul is fighting back against lawsuit abuse that leaves New Yorkers with some of the highest car insurance costs in the nation. Florida did it, and most drivers are paying lower insurance prices, some up to 20%. Albany lawmakers should back these reforms. Visit keepnewyorkaffordable.org to learn how the governor's reforms will put money back in your pocket.
And as I mentioned at the top, you did some pretty extensive reporting on the fundraising side of things, and there are people who spoke on the record about the challenge in getting that money. And I'm curious, when people had, maybe anonymity as they spoke with you, did they suggest that this situation is darker than it might appear, that people who might be putting their best face on this are maybe drinking the Kool-Aid too much? Or were people statements, that they might say off the record or anonymously on par with what they were saying on the record? Were people acknowledging the challenge?
Think for this story, the off the record conversations, such as they were, versus the on the record conversations, really weren't all that demonstrably different. And I think this is generally true. An acknowledgement that Blakeman has made strides with the base of the Republican Party, such as it is in a deep blue state like New York. You have to remember when he came into the campaign in December, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, she had I think a month-old campaign by that point. And soon after Blakeman entered, she got out. And there were a lot of hard feelings among the Republican faithful because Elise Stefanik is so popular in GOP circles.
And she didn't endorse him on her way out the door either.
No, she did not. But there is a lot of affection for Elise Stefanik among New York Republicans. I think a lot of Republicans believed that Stefanik was going to be a much more effective candidate against Bruce Blakeman. Having a woman run against the first woman governor would have been far more effective than a 70-year-old man, quite frankly. This is how Republicans feel about this. And also, Elise lined up with them far more on issues like abortion and also gun control, for that matter. So the first couple of weeks and months of the Blakeman campaign were spent trying to convince certain key Republicans who are a little bit more right-leaning that he still hears and understands their concerns and interests on these issues. And based on my reporting, yeah, he has been able to win a number of those folks over. But the kind of intrinsic challenges to being a Republican running in New York, those haven't gone anywhere. And the financing on the campaign side makes it all the worse for him in some respects. And then, we haven't talked about Governor Hochul and her campaign and how she's been kind of approaching this political year as well. The governor got that kind of near-death experience in 2022 when she won by only 6 points against Lee Zeldin. And since then, she's gained a lot more experience about how to do this. She has put together a far more aggressive campaign than we have seen in the previous year. And on top of everything else, she has tried to cut off any avenue of attack. 4 years ago, Zeldin ran an almost single-issue, single-platform campaign, and that was on crime, on public safety. It was actually hard to get Zeldin to talk about taxes because he was far more interested in talking about the bail law.
Sure.
And this time around, the governor seems to be addressing, or at least trying to show New Yorkers that she's addressing affordability issues. All those pocketbook concerns that people have that keep popping up in every poll that we see when it comes to what are the top 3 or 4 issues that voters have. They're all consumer pocketbook related concerns. And the governor's been pretty aggressive policy-wise in going after those issues as well, as we're seeing this state budget play out. So I think when you take all of that together, cutting off any sort of policy avenue for Bruce Blakeman, cutting off any sort of fundraising avenue for Bruce Blakeman, now you're talking about just sucking all the oxygen out of the room for him.
It really seems like the governor has settled into this comfortable lane that she's in cruise control in between now and the general election, especially since she gets to avoid a primary from her left.
Yeah.
Thinking about the public-facing side of the Blakeman campaign, it seems, from my perspective, that he's running a front porch campaign from Nassau County. He's making a trip to Batavia with State Senator George Borrello, but not necessarily in Albany as much as I would have thought for someone who does not have the name recognition that even Governor Kathy Hochul has. And it's not like she's Donald Trump or Barack Obama. So what do you make of that? Does that seem like this is something where they've got plenty of time to get out there and really people don't even pay attention till September anyway? So doesn't matter that he's not crisscrossing the state or all over New York City in March and April?
One thing that I was talking to some folks about this for this story, and Rensselaer County Executive Steve McLaughlin, who I spoke to, kind of went to the heart of this, which was 4 years ago when Zeldin ran. He had a 4-candidate primary that he was in. And while he had to spend money, maybe move a little to the right in order to accommodate some Republicans there, he got his name out there very, very early on. He had to go on televised debates. I think there were at least 2, if not 3 televised debates that Zeldin had to appear in. And he had to campaign around New York. He had to air TV ads. He had to kind of sharpen his focus on his agenda. And all of that helped him build his name recognition, not just with Republicans, but with also independent voters as well. People were paying attention to the New York governor's race a lot earlier than they otherwise would have been, due in large part to that primary. Like, that helped him. And Blakeman does not have that primary challenge that would otherwise have him going not just to Albany or Batavia, but it would be getting him on television, would get him into these podcast interviews beyond just these right-leaning conservative entities. He would be forced into
coming on the Capitol Press Room
to a much brighter spotlight a lot earlier on, including the Capitol Press Room, and that probably would have helped him ultimately. And but that's not the case this time around, since both the governor and Bruce Blakeman are on a glide path to the party's nomination.
Some challenges need someone who simply won't quit. Modern advocacy brings tenacity, strategy, and unwavering follow-through to every client it serves. Learn more at modernadvocacyllc.com.
Excessive litigation raises costs: car insurance, rent, even groceries. Governor Hochul is reforming our liability laws to stop bad actors from gaming the system and put New Yorkers first. Learn more at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.
Coming back to the governor, are there any potential self-inflicted or outstanding issues outside of her control that might serve as landmines to disrupt her path to re-election? I think of something like immigration that might potentially put her in an uncomfortable position because of where the left flank is on her party and where maybe independent or center-right voters are. But it seems like she's been pretty consistent about working down the more populist lane in that. So maybe it's not immigration. But is there anything where you think she might have problems between now and November?
I think the utility bill situation is probably the most complex that she's facing at the moment. It's not sustainable for a lot of people if they're paying $300, $400, $500 a month for their Con Ed or National Grid bill or what have you.
Sure.
So that's something that she is going to be hit on. And Blakeman is already starting to make that kind of a part of his campaign as well, is the high cost of utilities. Now, she is addressing it in a sort of it's not fair to say a roundabout way, but in a future way by trying to weaken the scope of the 2019 climate law. And none of this is actually contributing to utility bills at the moment, but she's saying that these are future costs that she is trying to address. That might be a harder swing with voters who over the summer will be paying, probably still hundreds more in utility costs than they otherwise would be. One potential solution is something that came out of the state assembly, which are these utility rebate checks that they proposed.
Love rebate checks in an election year.
A rebate check in an election year. The governor, of course, did her own rebate check for inflation last year. Last year was probably, quite frankly, not the year to do it. Look, these rebate checks, anyone who covers budgets or who does budget analyses outside of even the media will tell you are not the best policy.
Oh yeah,
they're
from
expensive,
the left and right.
They
say they don't work.
They don't really work. They don't really stimulate the economy. But from like a PR perspective, like public relations people love these rebate checks. They love them because you can send a little letter to anybody in New York. Here's $400 to make sure that you can bridge your utility costs for the next month or so, and people will make that connection. So will it have like a demonstrable impact on the economy? No, but does it win you some points with voters? Oftentimes, yes, it does. So I would not be shocked if in this budget process we see something like that.
Support for Capital Press Room comes from National Fuel, working to help customers understand what drives energy bills, from taxes and state-mandated programs to market-driven price increases for natural gas, which utilities don't profit from. More information at betterplansnobands.com.
And I think the other thing that's working for Hochul on the energy issue is that unlike 4 years ago, when you couldn't really blame the White House for everything because thou shalt not speak ill of a fellow Democrat, now she can say, well, your energy bill is high because we went to war with Iran or because of these tariffs. So there's another boogeyman, as opposed to 4 years ago when you couldn't talk about, say, the price of eggs or inflation because they'd say, well, that's your party that's driving those costs. But before I let you go, I want to think about down ballot races. And one of the pitches for Blakeman as a Republican candidate in December was he's going to have some legs for the congressional candidates in the suburbs, that he's not necessarily going to cause a divide that Stefanik might, which might hurt some of those more moderate Republicans looking to either pick up or hold on to seats. Is there any conversation about the down ballot effect of either potential gubernatorial candidate right now, Hochul or Blakeman? I know Hochul was speaking to a group of young Dems recently about her need to overperform in NY21. But what are your thoughts and what are you hearing?
Well, when Blakeman launched his campaign in December, we took a look at actually just the effect that would have down ballot, not just for these House races, which are obviously going to be very important considering how closely divided that chamber is between Democrats and Republicans, and the expectation that Democrats have a pretty good shot of gaining the majority there this year. But there's the other side of this, which is also the elections for these local government races. Like town supervisor, county legislator.
Oh yeah, all of these previous odd year elections.
Now, they used to be in odd years. Now they're going to be in even numbered years, and that's starting this year. And the Nassau County Republicans are obviously very concerned about ensuring that, not just do they unseat Tom Suozzi or Laura Gillen, but that they also retain all their local level power. And that's kind of the way Nassau County politics works to a certain degree, is that there's a lot of that power kind of flows from the local governments that contracts, hiring, you name it. There's a lot of power at that like town board level. So Bruce Blakeman has the potential of ensuring, or at least giving a boost to those Long Island, Nassau, and even to a lesser extent Suffolk County races, where you will maybe not have as many Republicans turn out in even numbered year. If their guy Bruce Blakeman is at the top of the ticket for the Republicans, that will potentially help drive some turnout that they otherwise wouldn't get, and perhaps save those town supervisors and county legislators and all of those folks who are loyal to the Nassau County Republican Committee. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind there. It's a little hyper-local, but it is in some respects kind of the tail wagging the dog when it comes to how the Republican Party is working right now and operating, where they were able to have that concern raised so much that now their candidate for governor is has that challenge of ensuring that local government leaders are reelected.
Yeah, this might be the first gubernatorial bid where the mission was to get town supervisors elected and not win the executive mansion. Although I'd love it if they would say that on the record.
We shall see. I'm very careful of how I'm phrasing this, of course.
Yeah.
But I will say that, like, look, if you talk to the Blakeman campaign, they say they're in this to win it, and that they are going to be mounting a competitive challenge to the governor. It's still early. This is only late March.
Yep. And
let's face it, voters really do not lock in on this stuff until well after Labor Day. So we've got a long way to go here so that's the caveat, is that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
What was the line? It's a long way to Tipperary.
Yes. In that story, we quote John Catsimatidis, the Republican mogul, radio station impresario, supermarket owner, Marty Supreme actor, who, it says that there's a long way to go here.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for making the time, and congrats on the great reporting. As far as I'm concerned, you're head above everybody else covering this race so far.
Oh, please, Dave, please.
I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it.
Oh, no, stop. I mean, a little bit more, but please.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
The Senate will do a budget, the Assembly will do a budget, and we'll compare those with the governor's proposed budgets. And hopefully by April 1st, we come up with one budget for the state of New York. Thank you very much, and that concludes this hearing.